I'm convinced that pianissimo is wrong. You know, that has to be it has to be a forte. I don't mean that he didn't put it there, but although there are a lot of misprints like that sometimes. But it's so intense at that moment. It's got to keep going and going and going. It's a good take. You know, my whole life I've never noticed that wasn't ta 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 ta.
Ta-da.
Yeah, ta ta.
Anyway,
It's been 23 years since I first looked at that piece, and I've never learned that it was ta ta.
I think it has a wonderful line.
Yeah, it is.
Really is beautiful. Do you know what strikes me when hearing this piece is that there seems to be an element of perfect continuity between Bach and Schoenberg.
Schoenberg thought so too.
Did he?
Oh yes, yes. He saw himself in the tradition of the grand masters. You know. Well, Schoenberg had this peculiar grand masterly sense of history, which really didn't go back much beyond Bach. And I'm not even sure it went convincingly to Bach. If you listen to his transcription of the Sedan Fugue, you know, they're not only rather awkward transcriptions as orchestration, and he was a superb orchestrator, so they didn't need to be, but they're not repeating of any convincing understanding of the Baroque, certainly. I think Schoenberg was very much a man of his time, but at the same time, he was not the last, so far as we can see, but certainly, for the moment at least, the last significant fabricator of the old German idea that in mystery of numbers there is control, you know, that by propping oneself up with a mystique of schemata, you know, one has a work. I think Schoenberg had great works, and I certainly think of this one as possibly my favorite, as I said before. Not because it has a rather ingenious row that divides itself into three parts, and if turned upside down at an interval of 6 semitones, does exactly the same thing up, you know, in the other way, and all that sort of thing. I think he felt at that moment in his life that there had to be something so convincing in terms of a raison d'etre that he needed that row, he needed that angle. But I think there's very little in it that could not have been done by a dramatic calculator, such as Schoenberg certainly was 10 years prior to writing this, achieving precisely the same dissonance, same effects, without being propped up, you know. I think a funny thing happened on the way to the 15th century, you know, and the thing that happened, to put a bad pun on a Broadway musical a few years back, was that composers went in search of identity, you know. And identity somehow became, by what we think of as the high Renaissance, perhaps mistakenly, became equated with system. My system versus your system, you know. And that in turn became equated with a kind of competitive instinct which said, I've got to outdo your system because history suggests that I must. And you can find no better proof of that than in the early, I'm not sure that he's doing it now, the early writings of Monsieur Boulez, for instance, who was convinced that history had a certain series of peaks, of which I presume he was one. And certainly one of those peaks was that which was attained by the Ricercare Assis from the musical offering. Another was the Grosse Fuge of Beethoven. I don't know whether this qualified or not. I think the Opus 9 of Schoenberg did. Certainly the Webern miniatures did, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think history moves that way at all. And even if it did, it would be a very depressing thought, because assuming one happened not to be captured by the zeitgeist, as I'm not, and I think you're not, from what I know of you, and your taste, then one would be left in a horrible backwater, although it might be not a very comfortable backwater, but it would be a place from which one really couldn't contribute. But on the way to the 16th century, and even locked into the 16th century, there were some characters who preserved something of the pre-identity quest sense. You know who my favorite composer is?
No.
Guess.
Well, I should have said it's Bach.
No.
Or Schoenberg.
Well, Bach or Schoenberg, if I were identifying, hopefully, with a master technician, yes. But in terms of spiritual quest, no. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Orlando Gibbons.
You mean the virginal?
There is only one that I'm aware of, the Orlando Gibbons, the late 16th, early 17th century.
Do you mean it really is your favorite composer?
In the sense that whether he's right or whether he's wrong, or whether he is putting anguished cross relations, as he loved to do, the G naturals against the G sharps, the end of modality, the beginning of tonality, you know, whether he's writing the purest hymns that could have been done by Purcell or Handel or Mendelssohn or whatever, or Charles Wesley, I can put myself somehow into his schematic shoes and say, yeah, I would have done that at that time, you know.